Hey guys, Gary Hallmark from Oracle. Been Oracle for a long, long time, 27 years. I want to talk about our new, I'm kind of excited about it because I've been working in DMN for, what, like 4 or 5 years now, and finally have some traction in building a product, actually. It's part of our Process Cloud service. I'll say very little about that. I want to go through these slides actually very quickly because I want to have some time, a lot of time for a demo at the end. So Process Cloud service, that's our BPMN suite in the cloud. It's a slimmed down version of the on-premise. It's got business process modeling and execution engine, integrated human workflow modeling and execution, basically a workspace where you can, task workers, knowledge workers can find their tasks, even execute them on their mobile devices or a bigger computer. And we have Oracle Business Rules, which is our actually JES that we've had for many years now, with many layers of user friendliness layered on top, kind of like the Princess and the Pea with the mattresses, but there's still, you can still feel a little bit of pain of the production rules under there. The stack is kind of getting old from the UI and user experience perspective, so this was a great time actually to do something new. So our decision modeling will sit alongside that, a new thing, but it will be delivered with our Process Cloud service. That will be how customers will get to use it, at least initially. We're kind of doing this differently from other vendors. We're building this from the bottom up. Maybe some of the history, because I was a big proponent of feel and built a prototype parser and kind of took that forward into the product. And it's based on JavaScript and modern UI, but our JavaScript tooling is much better suited for doing tabular UIs right now. So we're going to defer to a next release probably next year, the DRD, the diagram. So necessity being the mother of invention, we had to say, well, what are we going to do? So we just have a stack of decisions, and decisions higher in the stack can reference the results of decisions lower in the stack. So we just kind of have, if you think about it, that's sort of a linear requirements diagram. You're not necessarily requiring everything beneath you. If you actually know field, then you can probably recognize this as being very similar to a context turned upside down, right? And it's based on, we tried to use what all the cool new kids on the block are using with RESTful services and JSON in order to facilitate a good JavaScript experience. So we're also deferring to a later release the XML interchange. So we can't draw this in the product yet, but we can look at it here. And you can actually model this, but in the linear fashion. I'll show that. And this particular use case is extracted from real Oracle applications, where the decisioning here is very light, but the input data is complex in the sense that order has multiple lines. Each line can actually have multiple cost centers to distribute the cost among. And the purpose of this model is to sort of go through this order and figure out who all needs to approve this order in an abstract fashion. And I'll go into more detail. So how might that work? You know, mapping the DRD to what we currently have. The decisions are just these sort of boxes here that give the name of the decision, and then the logic in a expandable collapsible drawer. So you can sort of, expand and see the decision logic. You can collapse it, only see the decisions. BKMs are actually represented the same way, just with a different icon, which we still need some graphic artists here to give us good icons. So right now it just says FN for function, which is not even kind of a weird abbreviation for it. I'll have to travel to India and get this fixed. So that's where our UI team is in India. So for example, you'll have a higher level decision, determine all the approvers, and if you look here, you'll see this particular logic is a for expression. So what that's going to do is it's going to say for every line in order lines, order line is input data. Order is input data that contains lines, and what this is going to do is it's going to reference the the input data. It's also going to reference the line item approval, which here is a BKM, and it contains a decision table. So this is how you can apply a decision for every line in the order, and then the result of that to the floor is just a list of the results of every line. And this is actually can be recursively done because every line can have multiple cost centers. So it's been said, if you really understand field, you understand EMN, because there's nothing hidden, nothing below the water line. It's stateless, but you do need to understand the basics of field. It is kind of as a tongue-in-cheek, we call it friendly enough expression language, because there's historically been a lot of angst in the Rule community about how friendly is friendly, and I think it's actually been a battle of consultants versus vendors, because whatever the vendors would come up with, the consultants say, well, that's not friendly enough because they can sell you some services, right? So you've got the basic things. I won't go through this except just to point out that where did we come up with this? Well, it was heavily borrowed from XPath, if you know XPath, and so navigation, we changed the slash to dots. We still keep the bracket here for the filter notation. So this says, get the order line whose ID is equal to 2 and extract the quantity attribute of that straight from XPath, again with the dots and slashes interchanged. If the else expressions is also from XPath, for in return also from XPath, sum every n satisfies also from XPath. So we tried not to invent anything really here. Just allow you to put spaces and names as a nod toward business friendliness. Decision tables, not too much different there. This is a slightly older screenshot. We don't use R0, R1 anymore. I'll show you that in the demo. We did stick our neck out a little bit and say, let's try one minor extension. Let's give people a template for if then else, because it's commonly used. But this is just nothing more than giving you a template for the Boolean expression, and then the then expression, the else expression to return, depending upon how the Boolean expression evaluates. Exactly equivalent if you just type the if then else yourself in one long utterance, but this just gives a little bit of extra guidance. And if this works out, we might try this.
When the user types this order that we don't have help, but like IBM provides, so you do.
Yeah, we have some. And hopefully will work. And if this works out, then maybe we could have a for in return template. We could have the every n satisfies template, that kind of thing. So we're just kind of putting this out to see if this is interesting or if we need a more something else. For in return, here we don't have the template, so you just need to type that as a field expression. And just no need to go through this again. We have item definitions, again from the spec. There's no standard notation for it, so we just kind of made up something. We're going to hopefully improve that. The idea is this is basically your type definitions. It gives you the ability to better validate against input data and function definition arguments. And you can test decision models integrated into the tool without having to even expose them as a service. So you can, the idea is to put the business person, business analyst in charge of your own testing as much as possible, and to do that testing right away. And once you have service enable it, then you can invoke it with a REST connector from our process. And so let's switch to the demo now. So here's an empty, I've just created a new decision model, or I want to create a new decision model here. This boilerplate isn't quite, you can see it's repeating itself, so this is just a placeholder. But gives you an idea of what again, the status of this work in progress. We hope to release it as part of Oracle Public Cloud, the Process Cloud service, by the end of the calendar year. So we'll create a new one. I'm going to just create a very simple decision model from scratch. We'll call it what to bring more weather. And here you get a little bit of guidance to get started, a little bit of methodology, a little wizard that sort of shows you, what the buttons do, create a new decision, view and hide the services. We won't really need that right now. Input data we sort of hide over here on the side panel. And we have a new redo, and of course the ability to save your model. Oh, I think I just skipped over that. The ability to test. So we'll show you that in just a second. So let's get started. Basically what we're going to do is follow this methodology. We're going to create our decisions and input data. Then we're going to loop back and define the actual decision logic inside, and then we're going to test it. And we can actually expose it in service. Let me skip that part and go on to show some other pre-built models. So things flashing. So let's create a top decision. Call it what to bring for the weather, and you can put a description here, like we'll say, if it's cool, rainy, then you might want to bring a raincoat, right? And we'll have some other rules like that. Fill in the rest of these, get the question about answers, etc. Let's just start there. And so if it's on the top, now we need to add, well, we have an idea that cool and rainy could be some possible sub-decisions here, so at least temperature and raininess. So let's just find a couple of sub-decisions really quickly. We'll say rainy. I don't bother filling the other data for time. We'll say temperature. And now's probably the time. Note these things are blank, indicating that there's no logic yet. Now's a good time to maybe think about what our input data. We know that we need a weather forecast, presumably, right? So let's create a weather forecast. Let's call it forecast. As input data. That's going to need to be structured because we need at least a couple of pieces of information. So we actually need to create a new type here, and we can also name it forecast. Probably that should be defaulted. And we'll say we've got a rain percent. Here we're going to use user unfriendly names because these typically are interfacing with a less friendly system, like a process engine that requires XML naming rules or something like that. So a rain percent would be a number, and what else do we need? We need basically an average temp. That would be a number.
Can you use spaces here?
Yeah, you can, but when you do that, you're going to push those spaces on your interface to your process engine, and ours doesn't particularly like spaces, right? So
can you make an
interface? In the interface here, we're just going to use. I could use them here because I'm not even going to try to hook it to the process engine, but this is just something that you would probably do if you didn't like to use those. Well, as you see here, you'll be confined to these lower level decisions, and then that will use a more friendly name. But yeah, you could use spaces there. So we'll create the data, the forecast, right? And that to remind ourselves, look at the average temp and the rain percent. And so now we can just go through and start writing our logic, right? Temperature, let's say, we'll use some different logic to show you the different things. Here, let's try the if then else, right? So we can say, it's a little aggressive just showing us validation warnings right now. I'm going to work on that. But it does have the complete, so when we say this was temperature, so we'll say there's an issue here. It's going to keep putting this thing up too, probably, which we don't really care to have, but sorry about that. So if the temperature, say, is greater than, I don't know, what, 64, then we'll say it's warm. Otherwise, we'll say it's cool. Yeah. And we can save that to show that the validation warnings have gone away. Now let's, for rainy, that's just a simple Boolean expression, right? So we can.
Gary, can you make a list of values and enumeration as a data type?
Yeah, you could.
Okay. Because usually when you did something like that, returning the value warm, you would return a value as an enumeration, so that.
You could, but here we're just going to keep it simple. I'll show you how we'll kind of infer that though when we get up to the next level. So here we want rain percent. Okay, like it's bugged. The rain percent is, say, greater than 80, right? Then it's rainy, otherwise it's not. So that's really all we need to say there. And we can save that to make it happy. And now we can go up and create our final, we'll use this decision table here, right? And so we'll give our inputs, right? Say temperature and rainy, and we can actually save that, and it will pull up automatically because it can infer that the only values for that if then else decision were warm and cool, right? So it's automatically created the enumeration for you here is the allowed values. And of course, rainy being Boolean, it automatically knows that's either true or false. So we can add our rule. We can say, if it's cool. Here, what we've actually done, if you notice, this is coming in italics. And when I click here, I see the little T. This means this is using from the spec. You can avoid putting the double quotes if you have italics. We call those typographical literals, so we're supporting that. Here, there's this little bug where it's supposed to know that this is general mode, but it didn't in that case. But I need to put that in general mode because these are not strings, right? These are Boolean constants. So I can say, what, if it's cool and it's rainy, then I want a rain code. Again, this is a string because it's coming in italics, and I can add warm and rainy. Then I'll take an umbrella, and then if I can save it, some of my warnings will go away, but it's going to tell me I'm missing these two rules. Don't have the capability yet to automatically add them. I'll have to add them by hand. So I can add another cool. Then if I say that's true, save that, it's probably going to tell you I made a mistake. No, it's going to tell me.
False.
Yeah, if it's cool and true, I wanted to take the rain code, right?
No, you had already true. It's now false.
I'll say XX. Yeah, I'm just trying to show you that the tool is smarter than me, which is not hard. All right, so we're missing those two rules, and we have overlapping rules 1 and 3, right? That's kind of what I wanted to get to. Then we'll get rid of this. Okay, so let's go back and fix that. That was just me showing off. So if it's cool, and we want to get all the possibilities, right? So we want false here, then what do we want? Maybe a wool coat. And if it's warm and false, this isn't really what to wear, it's what to bring, so I can say nothing. Probably not be appropriate if it was what to wear. And then we can save that. All our warnings should go away. We should be done, right? So we should go to test. So it's automatically going to bring me up a form for my input data, right? I'm going to say my average temperature is, say, 50 degrees, and rain percent is 50%. Start the test. Dismiss this for now, and then I can see what this was. I need to bring a wool coat. That doesn't sound right. Is that right? Let's see. Why is that? Well, because it's rainy. It's not rainy, and because the temperature's cool. So that doesn't make sense. Okay, so that's right. And I can go and test another one. Yeah, just to show you that this isn't totally made up. So it's going to, it's much more likely to rain, but it's a little bit warmer, then should be able to take an umbrella, right? So we just built a simple decision model and tested it right before your eyes. We should be able to service enable it. It's kind of flying open for no good reason, but maybe it wants me to define the service. I can do that. So I'll say, whatever, bring service or whatever, right? And all you do is just drag, drop whatever your output decisions you want to be, go over to there. And that always happens. Because you need an input. So, what can I do? I can show, so I have the service, what do I do with it? Well, I can, right now I get the information, so this is a REST endpoint, so you get this REST endpoint here, and this is a JSON schema for what's expecting the inputs to be. This is the JSON schema for the outputs. The output is just a simple, by the way, it automatically builds this enumeration, right? It knows that you've got green code, umbrella, wool code, and nothing as the possible outputs. And it also generates problems in case there's some unexpected error that needs to return as part of that execution. So if I had Process Cloud Service here, we could go in and do all that, but I don't. But what we can do is, I think this is from Google. It's kind of a nifty little tool that developers use. Wish my UI guys were that good. So this is just it's just a little tool for being able to do HTTP requests, right? REST endpoints, and so there was my REST endpoint. Actually, it may not be the right one because it probably was left over from last time. Let me go cut and paste it from here real quick, just to be sure. Put that there. Now, we need to give it some body. It's already there from last time. It's probably not what I called it, though. I think I called it. So this is the JSON payload. Average temp. So if any luck at all, send that. No luck at all. Rain. Oh.
3%.
Rain percent. Yeah, okay. It should tell you that, doesn't it? So there you go, and you can actually change this here. If my average temp were a little bit higher, 70, then it'll tell me to get the umbrella. So that would be integrated seamlessly one day into Process Cloud Service, and you'll be able to make call it very easily from the process. All right, so now we're doing on time. We're doing fine, right? We'll look at a couple of pre-cooked decision models here. Let's see. So a couple of these from the DM community puzzles. Here's this collection of cars. We can look at that one really quick. What this puzzle is really asking, you can tell it's a puzzle because it has no input data. Therefore, they wouldn't make a very good service either. But it doesn't matter because you can just model it and test it right in the tool, right? So that's a good thing. So what this is saying, it's asking, here's a collection of cars, and here we are using a relation to show that, right? So you've got a group, make, and model, and you've got 10 cars here, 2 groups, group 1 and group 2, right? And at the top level, we want to ask a couple of things. Which cars are in all the collections, and which cars are only in one collection, right? So we just kind of so this kind of shows you some of the non-decision table, feel power of DMN. So the first thing we want to do is to ask, what are the groups? So just distinct values from cars.group, right? That's the relation. Group was the column. Actually, if I were to run this, I would have the answers I can show you along the way, right? So groups should be 2, right? Oops, sorry. It's not behaving right now. first we produce the groups that should say G1, G2. Make and model is a function. What that's going to do is just extract the car make and the car model from that relation from one row at a time. So we can ask what are the distinct cars, and here we pick the distinct values, we run over all the cars, and we extract the make and model from them. Okay, so there's the distinct cars. Right? And if you want the cars in all the groups, you have a bit of a mouthful, right? You want to take the distinct cars where the count of the non-distinct cars is the same as the number of groups that you have, and it turns out to be 4. There's 4 groups, 4 cars that are common in both the groups, and if you want to look at the cars that are just in one group, then that's a similar expression. It's so this is distinct cars, and the filter there is from XPath again, where counts are built in, where the count, again, the cars is the relation, so it's sort of nesting in this test, right? So you're looking for where the make of the cars is the distinct make, and the model is the distinct model, and if you count those, if you want the ones that are just in one group, then of course that has to equal 1, and then sure enough that you pick that out. Right? So that's how we can solve that problem.
Can you talk about your color coding? Is that some kind of
yeah, that's a syntax.
validation?
That's a syntax highlighter. You know, so it's coding the keywords differently from the sub-decision, from the decisions and input data. This is what it's supposed to do.
Where is DRD for this? Can you see DRD?
No, we don't do the DRDs. So, and I didn't draw them by hand. So, you know, all you know here again is this is a stack of decisions. So you know that cars in one group is, you know, doesn't, you know, is the final output decision, but you know,
Can
it
you
turns out this one is
find
2.
this piece of code from the big picture if I want to go here to modify it?
Not now. You know, we want to put a hot link in there, but we can't do it now. So you just have to know cars, and then look down, and we'll find cars somewhere under here because we have no input data in this
So
model.
even though distinct cars is different name than cars, it's the highlighting is kind of weird.
Yeah, you're right.
It's blue and cars
I think it's probably thinking that distinct is a keyword here or something like that. It's a work in progress. So the idea is to do syntax highlighting, and this is actually very difficult with the way field is, right? So this is
We know.
Yeah. So even though the server doesn't get confused, the UI is just using a JavaScript library called CodeMirror to do this, and of course it doesn't know about the funny ambiguities of fields. So if you have something like make and model, then here it actually isn't highlighting the and, but sometimes it will highlight the and differently because it thinks it's a keyword. Here it's trying to be smart, and I think in this case it is actually being smart, and it's seeing that make and model is actually a name that's in scope, and so it's highlighting the whole thing, but it doesn't always highlight it consistently. So there's definitely some work to do here. It's working. We have until the end of the year. Okay, let's quickly go to actually the one that I showed in the demo, right? I can do this one really quick though. This was actually due to Alan. This was something that was on one of the discussion boards, and this is the idea that I want to have. And here I do have input data, right? I've got input codes, right? Just a list of numbers in this case, right? And what I want to do is I want to reject if all of those codes are in some list of rejection codes, right? And so people have been saying, well, how do I do this with decision tables? How do I do this with decision tables? Well, don't do that with decision tables. You can do it just using a matrix, right? Where here's my rejection matrix, right? So 1, 2. If your input codes contain 1 and 2, it'll be rejected, or if they contain all of 1, 43, and 99, it'll be rejected, etc. Right? So how do I apply this matrix to my input data? Well, you just use this fairly simple, nested sum and every, right? So what we're saying is, some row in the rejection code matrix satisfies every code in that row, satisfies the input list contains that code, and that's all you have to do. And
That's business friendly.
well, you know, it might be friendly, it might be for a logician, right? I mean, it is concise, and we can run that, right? So let's say here's some codes I already have: 438816. Click. Is that going to pass or fail? Let's see. Reject is true. That's because I think was it back in look here. Oh, right. Why is that? Because 6 and 88, I believe, are enough to reject, right? And we have 6 and 88 in the list. If we go and remove that, test it again, and this time reject is false, right, as it should be. Now I wanted to show this this approval that I had in the slides. Right. So here, again, our decision stack. We've got we're asking for all the approvers of this order. What's going to depend on the line approvers? What's going to depend on the approvers for the lines, which in turn is going to need this business knowledge model to evaluate each line. And then each line could actually have a sub-detail, a distribution, a list of cost centers. And so you may have this function, BKM, that needs to be applied to that.
We're running over.
And I'll show you quickly. And then we have these helper functions here. Their only purpose is to build this abstract approver result to return. There's 3 kinds of abstract approvers. There's automatic, if it's a negligible amount. If the cost is distributed to a cost center, then you have a group approver that needs to be involved, like it's going to approve all maintenance contracts or something like that. And then otherwise, if it's based on just a dollar amount, then you have a supervisor, and when you're a level of supervisor appropriate to that dollar amount. So you can go and look at the rules with the decision logic top down. So all the approvers is a decision table. It's saying if the header amount, the total amount is less than 200, then we just can use an auto approver. This is specified to return a list, and so in this case we put the brackets around to make the auto approver be a singleton list. If it's greater than 3,000, then we're going to need a really third level approver, right? Because this is like a very large deal. If it's somewhere in between, then we're going to just look at the line approvers. We have flat here because this could return some sub-lists for each of the cost centers under a line, so we just want to flatten those and get one list of approvers in that case, right? So, and this line approvers, right, is a reference to a sub-decision, right? So we can look down. These are indications of this sort of helper BKM to return the approver, abstract approver for auto and supervisors with the levels 3. Here, this is a sub-decision. Let's go and see what that is. Lines approvers here. Well, this is just something that's going to iterate over all of the lines in the order, and it's going to invoke the line approver BKM, which is a decision table on each line, and then return a list of those approver results. That line approver is a BKM that contains a decision table. Never mind this. I think this is actually true. It is missing at least one of those rules, but it still works. And so for each line, it's going to say, well, if the distribution information for that line, that is, it's been apportioned to the number of cost centers, if that's greater than 0, then we're just going to loop in the decision table output itself. Sorry, there's an issue with the UI where it doesn't let me wrap inside the decision table. Maybe that's a good thing, but you can't see this. But anyway, what this is doing is it's a for loop that's going to loop over all the distributions in that line and invoke the BKM that makes the decision based on the distribution information, right? So here we've got master, detail, sub-detail, right, with a chain of BKMs and for loops that kind of iterate over the detail, which is the list in each of these cases, right? So the distribution approvers, again, simple decision table. It's going to take the cost center and just return the approver group that's responsible for that cost center, your maintenance and hardware. then, so that's basically it, right? And so we could test it. We can say, here we have a decision model. This doesn't even add up, right? I think I just did the test. Okay. So anyway, the line total here, sorry, the header is the footer in this case, is, so here we've got, it's generated this from, I should say, let's go look at the input data first, really quickly, and then go back here at the very end. Oops, where's my exit out? So my input data is in order here, and again, this is kind of structured, right? It's master, detail, sub detail. So let's see what they say that. Well, it's got a type definition for the order, and that order has got lines and a header. The header is we're doing this very simple for the demo, right? Just one field, a total, which is a number. Each line, again, being very simple, it's just got an amount and a distribution, and then the distribution, again, is just got the cost center. You get to make this simple, but you see the structure, master detail, sub detail, and from this information, right, when we click test, the tool will generate a form. It's going to be a little complicated here because of the structure, but what we've got here is basically a relation to represent that, where each line is a row in the relation, right? The columns, of course, are distribution and amount, and then the distribution, of course, can be another relation, right? So what we've got here is we've got two lines where the amounts are 1,100 and 700 respectively. For the first line, we have an empty distribution, right? No data here. In the second line, we have a distribution with two cost centers, right? And the sum of these lines is 1,800, right? So that based on those rules, we could run the test on this data, and it's going to keeps popping these drawers open. But here it's going to tell you that for this particular order, due to the one line that had no distribution but a high amount, you're going to need a second level supervisor, as well as you're going to need maintenance and hardware supervisor groups, approvers to approve this entire order. And just to again show you that it works, if I went here and changed this to something something very high, it doesn't add up, but it doesn't check that, so it's just going to look at this, and based on the header information, right, from that first decision table that we saw, it should tell you that you need a high-level supervisor because of the high order, right? So, again, we've tested, I didn't build this in front of your eyes, but it wouldn't have taken too long, but, the business analyst, I think, can do this and can manage to test. We want to evolve our simple test, smoke test facility to a full-fledged kind of test case facility over time. And of course, you can service enable it and then invoke it from your business process. So that's all I've got.
Questions? We will set up next. You answer any question.
Thanks.